Hi and welcome to another reading vlog. Today I'm actually really happy with this concept that I came up with, and it's to read books that I should have read in 2023. So basically during the year of 2023 I posted a lot of reading vlogs, a lot of themed reading vlogs, just what I enjoyed doing. But there are some books that were initially supposed to be read on those vlogs that didn't end up making it. So I thought it would be fun to start off 2024, basically. No, technically start off 2024, it's February. But that'd be fun to, at the start of this year, kind of kick things off by reading some books that I should have read last year. So yeah, in this first part of the vlog, I'm just going to tell you about the 5 books I will be reading and for what video I initially planned to read them for and why I ended up scrapping them. So starting off with the first book, which is Here's to Us by Becky, Albertalli and Silvera. At the start of last year, I made a video finishing up duologies, and originally this was going to be in it because this is the second book in a duology, so why a contemporary duology. But I ended up scrapping it because I thought the Dial A for Aunties duology was actually duology, and I got the second book and that would be perfect for the video. Turns out that's a trilogy, so I was wanting to swap things out. So I need to make a correction to read this book, and I'm actually quite excited to read it. It's been a while since I've read the first book, so I probably will read like a little recap of it before going into this. Although it's YA contemporary, so I'm assuming there wouldn't be too much I need to keep track of, but still. And then I also did a video last year, like reading books I never heard of before. Basically the idea was that I have my library has like this app to read ebooks from, and I love kind of scrolling to like the different sections they have, and my plan was to pick out 5 books that I saw in the sections that I never heard of before but look interesting to me, because I don't read enough books that I have not heard a lot of things about before. So I thought it would be fun, especially because, you know, it's never how I've picked my books. I've always picked books based off of recommendations and seeing things places. So even as a kid I took books by authors I recognize, or from properties I recognize, or my friends talked about like books or stuff like that. So like I was never one to like pick out books just because they looked fun. So I thought it would be a fun experiment to do. Yeah, originally I was gonna read 5 books in that video, but I kind of ran out of time and only ended up reading 3 books. And in that video I had a 4-star, a 2 and a DNF. So I feel like I need to read those final 2 books to hopefully see that I can pick this book for myself. So the 2 books that I have for that are The Mermaid of Black Conch and then Motherthing. But this one, actually, since making that video, I have seen pop around on my feed a couple of times, so that's interesting. And then next I'm actually doing a readathon pick, because last year for summer reading I didn't like talk about my TBR too much within the actual video, but basically my plan was just to go from my NetGalley TBR and kind of see what I was accepted for the longest ago that kind of like fit within the vibe of the readathon and like read that way, like backwards that way, if that makes sense. And I posted like a little TBR on my Instagram, which I'll pop up right here, of kind of just like the last couple of books that I had that way. And so I never was planning on getting through all of these books, and I definitely am not making up for that right now. But one of these books that I was very pissed that I didn't get around to, and I still haven't gotten around to, is My Dear Henry. This is a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde retelling, if I believe, and it's queer, I believe, and of course obviously there's black protagonist, so I am very excited to be checking this out. And then the final book for this video comes from letting the spinner wheel decide what I read until I get a 5-star. In that video, at a certain point, the wheel ended on The Final Empire by Bayron Sanderson, and I was not in a fantasy mood at the time. I got like a chapter in, not even, I believe. You know, I did get a chapter in, and my brain just was not grasping it because I just wasn't in a high fantasy mood, and therefore put it down and like spun again. And you know, it's time I finally read this book, because definitely since that moment within that video I've been like extremely excited to read this one. I've been trying to get into the right mood again, and like lately I've been very much in a fantasy mood, so I am hoping that this time around it will actually like click. That's my little 5-book TBR for this video. 2 of them physical, 3 of them ebook, and let's just hope this goes well. I started things off by reading The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey, and I ended up DNFing this one. I got 12% of the way in and just had to DNF. This is just over the first chapter mark though, so like it's not very far. So I'm not necessarily saying that there were many things wrong with this book necessarily, but it's just that I did not connect with the writing. Within the first chapter, there's kind of like three forms of writing. One is kind of like general narrative, then one is a bit poem style, which is supposed to be told from the perspective of the mermaid, and then there are journal entries from a certain character. It's also important. That is like the third chunk of the chapter. And from what I've seen in other reviews, it kind of is like a theme that runs throughout the entire book, that those three writing styles will be interchangeable, used throughout the book. I guess I'm not using my words. I just was not a fan of the writing style. Like the regular narrative, the writing wasn't necessarily bad, but I just wasn't connecting with. The poetry, I just did not understand. I'm gonna be completely honest. I've read several books and I've read a couple of books in voice, and I've never had this issue, but I just could not make sense of that. The diary entries, no offense, were not readable. They were definitely like supposed to be written in kind of like an accent, but I always hate that in books. I don't care. Just like it doesn't work, it never works, and it always is very unreadable to me. So yeah, at the writing, I could not connect to it, and I found myself kind of like rereading sentences to kind of like try and figure things out, but it was not clicking with my brain. So that's why I decided to DNF it. And something I do when I DNF books is read reviews. And from some of the negative reviews that I read, I'm very glad I decided to DNF this because things get questionable. At least if I have to believe this review, because a lot of people like love this book. So, you know, those reviews might also be questionable, but like okay, so let's talk about Here's to Us by Becky Albertalli and Silvera, which is book 2 in the What If It's Us duology. And basically, if you don't know, What If It's Us is a YA contemporary that came out like 2018, I think. It came out a while ago, and it has a bit of an unconventional ending, and a lot of people at the time were upset with that ending and wanted a more conventional one, hence the existence of this book. I have to say, it is very obvious while reading this that it was never the intention for this to exist. Like the original ending, I feel like was always Becky Albertalli and Silvera's plan, but because of the popularity of that book, as well as just like the discontent with the ending, I feel like it might have been forced to write this one. And therefore, I'm kind of glad I didn't include it in my finishing duologies video, even though technically I didn't finish 3 duologies video. I only finished 2 because the third one was a trilogy that I just didn't realize. But I feel like my feelings on this are very similar to my feelings on It Starts With Us by Kalynn Hoover, which I read in a video as well, which is also a book that did not need to exist. Like they're very different books. Don't take this as a if you like this you will like this comparison, because definitely not. They're very different books, but as a sequel, they kind of have the same idea. Like they exist because fans wanted them to exist, not because the authors felt like the story needed to be extended. And it's very obvious. If I didn't say, I give this 3 stars. I do still think this is an enjoyable read. I didn't hate it, but it felt very pulled out of thin air. I finished My Dear Henry by Kalynn, Bayron, and I don't want to talk about this book because it let me down so much. Like, I didn't even talk about how excited I was to read this book. I mean, I probably already did. I was really sad that I didn't get around to it during summer reading last year, and then for reasons that I don't know myself, I also haven't got around to it since. But I finally got around to it now, and I gave it 2 stars. I really need you to forgive me for that though, because I also did not want it, like honestly. Finishing this book kind of put me in a reading slump because I've been having a shit reading month in February anyway, but just not liking this book after I have been so excited for it just put me out of it. Like, I don't know if I can trust myself anymore. But basically, this is a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde retelling with Black main characters and queer main characters. So it's diversifying the original story. And I do really like how it did that. Like the commentary it had on racism at the time and the allegory for conversion therapy that the story ends up being, I thought was really well executed and I really liked. It's just that everything else in this book I wasn't a big fan of. The only character in this book that has any sort of personality is Henry, and he isn't even a main character, he's just the Jekyll Hyde character. So he needs a personality because otherwise the switch isn't obvious. But all of the other characters, including our protagonist, just don't have a personality. They are very, I wouldn't even call them one-dimensional because there's nothing to them. I can't tell you anything about them, and especially when it comes to a main character, it's just very disappointing. Like, if I'm gonna be in his head all the time, like, I might as well know something about him, you know. But that never happened. The romance, which is the main the moments between Henry and our main character, is the driving force of this entire book. It's not like the main focus of the book, but it is like the driving force behind everyone's action and stuff like that. It was so poorly developed, like so poorly developed, that it's almost atrocious. You can barely say it even was it developed because there was nothing. And that also just made the whole book just kind of fall flat on its face, because like, you're gonna say it's romance that means nothing to us, it's like behind everything. Sure. Hi, how are you doing? I finished Motherthing actually a couple of days ago, but I just have been struggling to fully like wrap my head around my thoughts on it, so I thought I just wait just a little bit to give this update. And honestly, it's been a couple of days and I still don't really fully know how to talk about this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, so let's start there. It's really hard to wrap my head around it, mainly because I have very conflicting thoughts on it, but also because this book is just very much out of my comfort zone. It's not anything like I typically read, so I also don't know how to review it because it's not something I typically review either. So I'm gonna try. But basically, I like this book. I had a fine enough time reading it. The writing did take me like 1 or 2 chapters to get used to, because it is very like stream of consciousness, but also very weird and odd in a way, because I mean, character is just unhinged. So that just takes a little bit of time to get used to. But once I did think that this was a very quick read, a very engaging read, very compelling, and I wanted to keep reading. There's like the sense of like eeriness throughout the entire book that just makes you curious to see what's really going on, what's happening, what's going to happen, that I really liked. I'm not gonna say I liked the characters because they're not meant to be likable, but I liked following them, if that makes sense. And I do think that this was again an enjoyable read. However, the 2 goals of this book basically are to be funny and to be scary, and I don't think it was either. It does get very disturbing towards the end, so like, look up content warnings because you're gonna need that. It's not like the main reviews from people I've seen that love this, because we had a lot of reviews to try and figure out my thoughts on it properly. But from what I've seen from the people who love this, it is absolutely horrific and it's incredibly funny. And that's just something I did not find with this book, and I feel like that's why I'm having such a hard time talking about it, because even though I enjoyed it, I feel like it failed its main purposes for me. It wasn't horrific, it wasn't like that scary, and it wasn't like funny at all. Like, I generally didn't laugh once while reading this book. I even had like a little chuckle, like a little giggle. Like, I didn't even think about the fact that this needed to be funny. Hi, so I finally finished The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and this generally feels like such an accomplishment. Like, I'm so proud of myself. It's like a little applause. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, which, before you come to attack me, this was so close to a 5-star. Like, if I did decimal points, this would definitely be like a 4.75. But it's just that I feel like it took a little bit to get interesting, and like the middle part of the book, like, it was very engaging and very interesting, but it was a bit like not a whole lot happened, and then like the last bit like blew me away, like absolutely 5 stars the last bit. But like, everything leading up to it was a 4 to me, so I landed on a 4 instead. I did just finish it and my mind's racing with so many thoughts, because like I said, this last 150 pages or so are everything. Honestly, so well written, so high action, and full of so many twists and reveals that are so cleverly done, where it's like takes you completely out of nowhere, but also like makes sense for the progression of the story. Like, once the reveal happens, everything clicks into place. You're like, shit, how did I not see this? And it is just so good and so well crafted, and I totally understand the hype behind Brandon Sanderson. Like, this has been on my TBR for like ages, and I have never read it because I just been too scared of it because it is so hyped, and because Sanderson as an author just generally is so hyped. But he deserves it. This was such a well crafted story. Like when I say that the most of this book was a 4-star for me, like that's still like a really high 4-star because I generally had a great time reading that. That was very interesting, very engaging. I like the characters. I'm not the biggest fan of Vin, but seeing her character progression and like what she goes through throughout this book, I am assuming she will become like a completely different person by the end of this series, and I'm very excited to see that growth happen because, spoiler alert, I ordered immediately the final 2 books, like the next 2 books in the series. So like the first era of Mr. Bourne I have ordered. I finished this at exactly 11 p.m. I immediately went to order the next 2 books online. That's how fucking obsessed with this I was. Anyway, let's just wrap up the vlog in total. So I read 5 books in this video, and I feel like it was a bit of a failure ratings wise because we started out a video with The Mermaid of Black Conch, which was a DNF. Then I think this is the order. Then I read Here's to Us by Becky and Silvera, and this was a 3-star. And then I read Mighty Henry by Kalynn, Bayron, which was a 2-star. Motherthing by Ainslie Hogarth was a 3-star, and then The Final Empire by Sanderson, a 4-star to wrap things up and make things right in the world. Kind of, this is the only book I do regret not reading before this video, you know? Even if I say like at the time I'm glad I decided to put this down because it would not have done it justice with just like the mindset I was in at the time. I do wish I had read this way sooner. With the other books, I mean, I'm glad to have this one ticked off because it's been on my TBR for a while and it is like an open series, but I feel like I was not really missing out by not reading the other 2 books. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you thought of these books, if you've read them as well, what you thought of this video concept. I thought it was fun. I don't know if I'll be making one of these next year. We'll see how my video making process will go this year, but I still think it was like a fun concept to do, even if the ratings didn't turn out the best. And yeah, I'll see you next time.
Here I am again, the same old situation. Why does the God thing have to be so complicated?